So first things first, just a quick recap on the two things that we looked at last week, and that was installing libraries and then activating those libraries. So just in case anyone has forgotten, it was install.packages and then the package name. Okay, this is what we would do to install a particular package. So I'll just pick ggplot2, even though I've already got it, which I'll just do ggplot. Okay, so that's because it doesn't exist. And then provided we have installed a particular package, what we need to do next is library and then the name of that package. Okay, now I know that ggplot2 is already activated, so that's fine. But anyway, this is just a quick recap of last week. So just out of it, well, actually, I won't ask the question. I'll just assume that this isn't the case. If you have ever used any Linux-based operating systems, then you're in luck, because some of the ways that we navigate around our file system within RStudio are similar to the way we would do it within a Linux-based operating system. Now, within RStudio, okay, we can look at a particular directory. Now, if I type get wd, okay, what this tells me is where RStudio is currently looking. Now it's telling me that it's looking within the users folder on my C drive, within the users folder, within Stephen, which is me, within my documents folder. Okay, now let's say I wanted to move to a different location. Okay, then what I can do is I can do set wd, and then I would put the file path to that location within here. So I'm going to move to my desktop. Oh, cannot change directory. Oh, fantastic. That's just brilliant. Okay, so I've got a funky bug coming up at the moment, but that is the command to set our working directory. Now, let's say you are in a particular directory, so like I am here, and I want to see what files are actually within my directory. What I can do is I can do list.files, okay, and this will show me all of the stuff that is inside my directory. So we've got Call of Duty in there. We've got a CSV, which is actually quite useful because we can use that there. What else have I got in there? I've got Google Stock, so this was for another project. Yeah, so I've got some stuff in here, and we're actually going to have a look at this one here. So we're going to try and open this. So let me get the exact command for it. It is read.csv2, and then in speech marks, housing in London.csv. Okay, so this is just kind of a bit of a brief one. If you want to read in a data set, now this is something that potentially you're gonna want to do. Depending on the type of file it is, if it's a CSV, and usually in most cases you're going to use read.csv2. Okay, so it's this command here, and then what you do is you're going to put in brackets and then in speech marks the name of that file that you'd like to read. Now you can include a file path. You don't have to move to the directory that you want to be inside of. You can just include a file path. So let's say it's on my desktop or within my downloads folder, and I don't want to move to my downloads folder. I can just include a file path, and that'll work absolutely fine. So you are able to do that. So I'm just gonna clean this up again so we don't have too much junk on here. All right, so we've talked about reading CSVs. It may seem a little bit erratic the way we're going about, but there's a lot of different things to cover. So we've talked about loading stuff from libraries. We've talked about like moving around and looking at our file system within RStudio. We've talked about reading files. And now the next thing that we're going to do is kind of like the basics. It's like the variables. We're also going to look at vectors. Okay, so with R, there's a couple of different ways to assign variables. So the first things first is you need to decide what your variable is going to be called. So I'm going to call it my name. Okay. Now my name can be assigned in a couple of different ways. One of them is using an arrow. So you can say that this is going to be stored within this location. You can also use equals. You can always I think you can use an equals arrow. Personally, I quite like using equals because it just makes sense in my head, but there are a couple of different ways you can do that. You can explore yourself, but setting a variable is just as easy as that. And there we go. We now have my name. So we can just check that we have my name. My name is hello, even though obviously my name is not hello, it's Stephen. So we'll just change that to Stephen. Can't even spell my name. Okay, so let's say within a function, we want to print something, okay? We want to print a variable. Well, we can do that using print. So print is a function that some of you, if you've done programming before, will have come across, or hopefully have come across before. And you can literally just print whatever you want. You can print variables, you can print text. I think we can do string interpolation like this. It's not like that. And no, it's not like that. I need to check how it's done. But you can print strings and variables at the same time as well. So let's say you wanted to print a message, then you are able to do that. So yeah, that's another thing that we can do with R, and that is quite helpful when you want to sort of view the value of a particular variable or the value of a particular vector. Now, I keep using the phrase vector. When I was first learning, this was a kind of a bit of a weird concept to me. I'd not really heard of vectors before. And there's a couple of different rules that we need to pay attention to with them. So the first rule is that all of the values within a vector need to be the same. Okay, so actually let me start again. A vector is basically a placeholder for a set of different values, okay? Similar to like an array or a list, but we call them vectors, okay? Now within that vector, all of the values, as I said, need to be the same. So we can't have like a number and a word. It's like a number, a string, a Boolean value. We can't do that. They all need to be either Boolean, integers, strings, floats, whatever you want to put in there. They just all need to be the same. So that is something to remember. Now, to create a vector, what we're going to do is, let me think of a name for a vector. We'll just call it my vector. So my vector equals, and then what we do first is we put a C, okay? And this tells R that we're going to be creating a vector. We then put two brackets, open and close, and then whatever we put within these brackets, this is going to be put into our vector, okay? So let's say I want to have some numbers in my vector, okay? I can do this. So I now have my vector. If I call my vector, it is a vector of 10, is it? Yeah, 3, 6. Yeah, it's 9 numbers, 1 to 9. Okay, so fantastic. We now have this vector. And you might be thinking, Stephen, but why do we do this? Like, why do I actually care about having vectors? So vectors are a good way of storing large quantities of the same data. And also, this vector is ordered. Okay, so the order that this vector is in will not change unless we physically change it. Okay, whereas some other data structures, the order is not necessarily fixed. They can sometimes change. Now we're going to have a look at sort of some kind of set theory stuff and accessing these values. So you may be thinking to yourself, Stephen, we have this vector of 9 values, but what if I only want the first one or the third one or the fifth one? Okay, well in that case, we're going to do this. So if any of you guys have ever done if you've ever done any programming before and you've accessed values in lists, it works in a very similar fashion. So what we do is we write down the name of our vector, and then we put 2 square brackets, or an open and a close. Then inside of this, we can do a couple of different things. We can either specify one exact value, and that's absolutely fine. So in this case, I'm going to specify the value 5, okay, and that will return the value 5. the reason it has returned, I know that seems a bit weird. The reason it's returned 5, pardon me, is because 5 is actually the 5th value in our vector. So let me just, I'm just gonna change our vector. I'm just gonna put some. Okay, so I've just changed it up so that we don't have numbers in there. And if I want to get that 5th value again, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get mushrooms. So if you want to get just one specific value, then you can do that. If you want to get a range of values, you can also do that. So you, again, if you've done programming before, you may have seen this. We'll do my vector, then in square brackets, we can then pick the range that we want. So let's say we want the 2nd to the 4th value. Okay, we put my vector, and then in square brackets we have a 2, and then a semicolon, sorry, not a semicolon, a colon, and then a 4. Okay, and what this is saying is we want the range of 2 to 4. If we press enter, we now have the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th value inclusive. Okay, so this is just some sort of basic stuff we can do with sets. We can also exclude particular values from sets. So let's say you want all of these values except for the value at number 3. Okay, well then what we can do is we can go into these square brackets and we can put a minus sign. We're going to put a minus sign and then a number 3, okay, because we don't want the value at number 3. Now if we put a minus sign, what that's going to do is it's going to exclude it, and we can see here now that we have that set but we don't have the value cow. So this could be a really good way of removing values from your vector. So if we have a look at, and I'll give you some actual like real applications. So at the moment we have 6 values in our vector, okay, and this is what's in our vector. And we can have a look up here. Oh, I can't open it up, but up here we can also see there are 6 values within our vector. Let's say we do want to remove it. We want to remove that 3rd value. We could do my vector equals my vector, and then take away that 3rd value. And now if we have a look within my vector, there are only 5 values, so we've completely removed it. All right, so this is a way that we can kind of chop and change what's inside of our vectors, and sort of get rid of particular values. Okay, and then we can also, let's say we have a vector. So as you can see that I'm kind of focusing on vectors today. Let's say we do have a vector. Okay, something that we can do if we're not sure what the data type is we can do type of, and then put the value at the name of the vector inside. So you can see here I'm doing type of, and then my vector, and I press enter, and it's character. So previously I said string. Now the data types for R are a little bit different to how they are in some other languages. So in this case, a string is effectively a character. So as we can see here, and then so there's also something called factors. Okay, so factors are a special type of vector for storing categorical data. So categorical could be colors could be categories. Okay, so we have team red and team blue. Okay, and those two could be categories. Now if we want to create a factor, what we're going to do is we'll go team equals factor. Let's see, and then red, blue, red. Okay, so we have now got a factor. Now, as I said previously, factors are used for storing categorical data. Okay, so this means think of categories. Okay, when you can think of like something like Netflix or Spotify where they put music into genres. These are examples of categories. Okay, now what we can do is we can actually and this will be something that the guys later on in the previous weeks may come on to, is you can actually put these factors into an order. So you can say that if we were looking at pain, okay, minute pain is, or mild pain is going to be lower than severe pain, and that's also going to be lower than extreme pain. Okay, and this is just some stuff again that we can do with these factors and these vectors. Okay, and basically the whole point of having these vectors is data management. So when you store a data set, you can have it stored either as a data set, or you can, if you're just looking at a particular column, you can store it as a vector. So something else that we can have a chat about is, it's quite understandable that in many cases you're not going to know how to use a particular function. Okay, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. It's a learning process. You're learning about R. I wouldn't be surprised if many of you haven't ever touched it before. You've never looked at it. You've never done it before, so you've got absolutely no clue what you're doing. Now, one way of getting help is having a look at sort of the documentation, having a look at this book here. So this is one that I sent out last week, and if you haven't done already, it is 100% worth having a look at. So definitely do have a look at that at some point. But another way of getting some help is actually, let's say we have this read.csv2 command, okay? We don't know what it does. We don't know how to use it. What we can do is we can put a question mark in front of it. So we put a question mark in front of it. We don't need to include any brackets. We just press enter. And what will happen is down in the bottom right, in this help box down here, we can get some information about that command, that command, pardon me. So if we have a look down here, we can have a look at read.csv2, and we can see what parameters we need to supply to it. So in this case, we can give it a file, we can tell it if there's a header. So within data sets, sometimes your data set will have a set of headers or a set of titles at the top of each of the columns. Now you can specify whether or not this data set has that or it doesn't have that. You can specify what the separator is. You can, what does fill do? And this is the other good thing as well, is if you're not even too confident on what the actual parameter is, you can have a look down here. So quote, for example, the set of quoting characters to disable quoting altogether. So this is to do with like text quoting, I think. And basically, if you're ever sort of a bit in doubt about how to use a particular command, then this is one way of getting a bit of assistance. Okay, so just remember, stick a question mark in front and then type out whatever the command is. So plot, for example, okay? If you want to plot something, let's use the default scatter plot. Then we can do it like this. So it'd be a question mark and then a plot, and then we can have information about our plots here, or the plot command here. Now we aren't going to come on to plotting data today. Again, this can be something that's spread out over the next 2 weeks. So you've had like 1 week of kind of hopefully getting yourself a little bit comfortable with R, just sort of like some real basics, getting yourself set up, knowing how to move around the file system, knowing how to get help. And then in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking more at the actual data manipulation and the plotting of data. Okay, so that is actually kind of going to be it for today.